On Monday, I was honoured to represent the Parliament along with party leaders at a service at the National War Memorial at Edinburgh Castle to mark the 3rd anniversary of the war in Ukraine and to show our solidarity with all of those suffering as a result of this ongoing war. Before we move to First Minister's questions, I invite party leaders to make some remarks, and I call on the First Minister.
President Officer, peace is not gifted to us. It has to be nurtured, and sometimes, regrettably, it has to be hard fought for. So while Russia repeats the worst mistakes of the past, years into an unnecessary war, Ukraine calls on Europe to defend her interests and to support her fight for democracy and the rule of international law. That is why Scotland supports Ukrainian independence. That is why Scotland supports Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. That is why Scotland will always work with Ukraine towards the goal of absolute peace in Europe. At this moment of great uncertainty, let me be clear that Ukraine must sit at the table of any peace agreement. This is the only way to achieve a peace which not only delivers Ukraine from barbaric aggression, but a peace which protects Ukraine's heritage, her culture and her social and economic future. We have extended a warm welcome to Ukrainians who have sought refuge in our own country. That is the very least that we should be able to do. Today, as ever, Scotland stands with Ukraine.
Thank you. I now call on Russell Finlay.
Thank you. On Monday, it was my great privilege to attend the service at Edinburgh Castle to mark the 3rd anniversary of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And I was moved by the sight of Ukrainian flags flying proudly over our capital city in solidarity with those who are suffering unimaginable bloodshed and horror. We remembered the countless innocent lives that have been lost in defence of their country and our shared values of freedom and democracy. And we should take pride in the United Kingdom's significant and unwavering support of Ukraine. We all want the war to end, but the people of Ukraine deserve this to be on their terms, not those of Vladimir Putin.
Thank you. I now call Anas Sarwar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. For 1,099 days, the people of Ukraine have felt the full force of Russian aggression. 1,099 days of invasion, of bloodshed, of indiscriminate bombing, of drone attacks, of sheltering underground, of fear and heartbreak. But today, Ukraine still stands and is still strong. The front line of democracy remains resolute thanks to the bravery of Ukraine and its people. Scotland and the United Kingdom have reason to be proud for the role we have played in giving Ukraine the tools it needs to defend itself. And as the Prime Minister has made clear, nobody wants this bloodshed to continue. But as we seek an end to this war, there can be no discussion about Ukraine without Ukraine. The people of Ukraine must have long-term security. 1,099 days later, and for as long as it takes, we stand with Ukraine. We stand for peace and freedom in Europe and around the world.
Thank you. I call Lorna Slater.
Officer. Today, this Parliament recognises 3 years of Ukrainians standing strong in the face of Russian aggression. 3 years of immense suffering, displacement and loss of life. From the very beginning, Scotland has stood in solidarity with Ukraine, welcoming Ukrainians into their homes and communities, and I am proud that as a Parliament we are just as united in that support today. I want to see Europe and the UK standing strong behind Ukraine, its people and the virtues of democracy. I wish for peace for Ukraine with all my heart, but on their terms and with them at the table.
I call Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, at this moment and for every moment of these past 3 years, it is only the courage of the armed forces of Ukraine that has held back the menace of Russian expansionist tyranny. In recent weeks, much reference has been made to the similarities that exist between our time and the prelude to the Second World War, to appeasement and the rising tide of fascism. I have found myself thinking of the words of Winston Churchill used on the floor of the House of Commons in 1940 when he pledged to ride out the storm of war and to outlive the menace of tyranny, if necessary for years, if necessary alone. Presiding Officer, the fighting men and women of Ukraine have ridden the storm of war for years, but they are not alone. This Parliament stands with them, and so too does the nation that it serves. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Slava Ukraine. Heroim Slava.
Thank you. Our next item of business is First Minister's questions. And at question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scotland's Information Commissioner David Hamilton says that he's astonished at the sheer number of public bodies in our country, and I quote, "There are literally hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of public bodies, and I keep finding new ones." He describes, and again quoting, a hidden and complicated landscape across the public sector. This is not some random person venting on social media. He is the gatekeeper of all state-held information, the ultimate authority in deciding what information is made public. The Information Commissioner can't even work out how many public bodies there are. So if he even can't work out how big the SNP state has become, what chance do the paying public have?
First Minister.
Well, the Government has, over the course of its time in office, reduced the number of public bodies that we had, that we inherited, and we also take forward an agenda which ensures that we adequately consult with wider Scotland on the policy questions that we take forward. The Government obviously maintains a stringent approach to the management of public expenditure to ensure that we are constantly challenging to maximise value, and those considerations underpin the budget that I'm glad that Parliament passed on Tuesday.
Russell Finlay.
Well, the information told Parliament that he discusses the big state with the Auditor-General for Scotland. Mr Hamilton said that he doesn't, and I'm again quoting, think there's a map that explains it all, and that they play a game called Public Authority Bingo, in which they ask each other, have you heard of this one and have you heard of that one? The Auditor-General and the Information Commissioner, the two most powerful civil servants tasked with keeping the state in check, are hitting a brick wall of SNP secrecy. So will the First Minister give them and all of us a bingo call by shouting out the exact number of public bodies there are in Scotland?
First Minister.
On the 1st of December 2024, there were 131 public bodies in Scotland under our control. In 2007, when the Government came to office, there were 199. So there's the answers that Mr Finlay's looking for. And by the way, as a point of information, I thought Parliament was here to hold the Government to account.
Russell Finlay.
I thought he might come up with the 131 number, but the First Minister, a cursory check would inform him that he's missed out at least another 75 public sector organisations. And it's truly farcical that public servants in charge of information and financial transparency can't get the answers that they and the public deserve. The size of the bloated SNP state is out of control and shrouded in secrecy. This is costing taxpayers a fortune and reducing funding for the front line. The SNP are failing to deliver efficient and effective public services, and this must change. So I'm going to make a suggestion to John Swinney. Will he bring in a credible business leader from outside his government to sort this out?
First Minister.
Well, I take these issues very seriously, and throughout my time as Finance Minister, I would be regularly attacked in this Parliament for setting exacting efficiency standards on public sector budgets on an annual basis, and the result of that was that we released significant value for investment in the public finances. Now, I'm just struggling to remember about the Police Scotland reforms, for example. But the Police Scotland reforms, and I'm going to say this, I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll correct it. Mr Finlay can correct the record, actually. I think the Conservatives opposed us on Police Scotland. They did. Well, my good and dear friend Christine Graham is not for the first time in my life coming to my rescue. The Conservatives opposed the formation of Police Scotland, one of the biggest reforms of the public sector landscape, which delivered £200 million in savings. And what we've been treated to today is the usual hypocrisy from Russell Finlay.
Russell Finlay.
I'm setting out ways to save taxpayers' money, while John Swinney is only ever intent on taking more of it. He's got no respect for public finances. Just take a look at his dismal record. The truth is, they've created far too many talking shops that achieve nothing. They've published 800 plans and strategies which no one reads, and nobody even knows how many SNP state agencies there are, not even the Auditor General and the Information Commissioner. And this year's SNP budget will again hammer working Scots by raising taxes, which this lot will then squander on yet more nonsense. Isn't it basic common sense for John Swinney to start saving taxpayers' money by cutting quangos and funding the front line instead?
Yeah. First Minister.
Well, we've just passed a budget which is funding the front line, and Russell Finlay didn't vote for it, so I don't know what on earth Russell Finlay is complaining about. And we've delivered just one example of a public service reform that we've delivered, which has leveraged out £200 million in savings, and Russell Finlay and the Conservatives opposed that. So it's all talk and no action from the Conservatives. And the programmes that have been taken forward by my Minister for Public Finance, Ivan McKee, are securing savings expected to reach up to £280 million over a 2-year period by the end of 24-25, with further projected savings of nearly £300 million over the following 2 financial years to the end of 26-27. So I take deadly seriously the management of public expenditure, because I want to make sure as much money is available to support frontline services as is possible. The difference between me and Russell Finlay is I'm prepared to vote for a budget to support the front line. He's not.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Almost a decade ago, when John Swinney was Education Secretary, he said the defining mission of the government was education. On Tuesday, it was revealed that under the SNP, the attainment in Scotland's schools is declining across the board, and shamefully, outcomes for young working-class Scots are getting worse compared to those from wealthier backgrounds. And today, the Auditor-General said the SNP had failed to properly provide the support for those pupils with additional support needs. He said the Scottish Government has failed to plan effectively, and went on to say it is unclear whether all Scotland's children's right to have an education that fully develops their personality, talents and abilities is being met. Isn't it the case that Scottish education, once the envy of the world, is going in the wrong direction under the SNP?
First Minister.
I'm always prepared to listen to reports from the Auditor-General and to consider the implications for government and for local authorities, because local authorities are responsible for the delivery of education in our country. So we will take those issues seriously and respond accordingly. I think it's important that I reassure members of the public about the progress that's been made on closing the attainment gap. The overall poverty-related attainment gap has reduced by 60% since 2009-10 under this government. The poverty-related attainment gap between young people from the most and least deprived areas meeting standards in literacy is at a record low in primary schools at 20.1%, and the attainment gap has reached record lows between secondary pupils achieving third level in both literacy and numeracy at 12.7 and 12 percentage points respectively. And in relation to the additional support for learning, in which I accept the absolute necessity to make sure that good outcomes are achieved for young people, the attainment gap between school pupils with additional support needs and those without has reduced by almost half since 2009-10, 45.3% to 23.1%. Now, I accept there is more that needs to be done, but important and substantial progress has been made on closing the attainment gap, and that is good for children and young people in our country.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, John Swinney was the person tasked with improving Scottish education, and he has failed. Just last year, 42.6% of pupils left school without a single higher or equivalent. That's almost 24,000 young people. 16.5% left school without a single National 5 or equivalent. That's over 9,000 children. And 1,300 young people left school without the most basic of qualifications. The future of every single one of these children should matter. And, Presiding Officer, let's not forget it was John Swinney who downgraded the exam results of working-class kids during the pandemic. And now, as First Minister, he is overseeing the betrayal of young Scots with the attainment gap widening. Why is this SNP government letting down a generation of young Scots?
First Minister.
I'm afraid Mr Sarwar is going to have to learn to adapt his questions based on the information that I put on the record. So let me repeat the information that I put on the record, Presiding Officer.
Members.
The overall poverty-related attainment gap has reduced by 60% since 2009-10 in the face of unremitting austerity from the United Kingdom Government. So progress is being made. There is an improvement in the outcomes for young people over that period. Mr Sarwar talked about the outcomes for young people leaving school. The percentage of young people in a positive destination 3 months after leaving school is 95.7%, the second highest since records began. So I'm afraid Mr Sarwar has to... I accept there is work to be done. But Mr Sarwar has to accept the evidence I'm putting on the record that as a consequence of the investment that this government has made, we are making progress in improving outcomes for young people and in closing the attainment gap, and Parliament should support that endeavour.
Anna Sarwar.
This is a government that includes a zero-hour contract or voluntary work as a positive destination for young Scots. And I literally quoted 42.6% of pupils left school last year without a single higher or equivalent. And it's interesting the First Minister didn't respond to that statistic. Almost 45% of young people leaving without a single higher in our schools. And teachers have been warning about this for years. And education expert Professor Lindsay Patterson said this morning, the Scottish Government has never had a coherent strategy for dealing with the educational effects of poverty. John Swinney's report card is woeful. Attainment down across the board, more pupils leaving school with no qualifications, fewer additional support need teachers. Our classrooms should be places for learning, growing and flourishing. And the promise I make is that as First Minister, I will make sure every young Scot can reach their potential. That's why we will agree new Scottish industry standards so that young people can see the future opportunities that their school subjects and qualifications will give them. That's the new direction we offer. So after nearly 2 decades, the SNP have nobody else to blame for the damage done to Scotland's education system. So isn't it clear that the SNP's defining mission is now their defining failure?
First Minister.
Mr Sarwar might have conjured up that script before he actually asked me any questions, but I have refuted the detail that he's put on the record because we are making progress in closing the attainment gap, as I recounted to Mr Sarwar a second ago. The attainment gap under this government has reduced by 60% since 2009-10, and I am absolutely determined to improve outcomes for young people. Why are we doing that? Well, we're doing that because this was the government that put the investment in to give children the best start in life by the expansion of early learning and childcare. This government has put the money in place to support the improvement in the lives of young people living in poverty by the Scottish Child Payment. Originally set at £5, now £26.70 to every eligible child, helping to lift hundreds of thousands of children out of poverty. It's why in Scotland we are the only part of the United Kingdom where it is projected that poverty amongst children will fall when it will rise in every other part of the United Kingdom under the stewardship in England and in Wales of the Labour Party. So I would say to people in Scotland, look at what the SNP has delivered to improve the opportunities and the life chances of the children and young people of Scotland. And look at what a Labour government does, that goes into office promising to reduce fuel bills for individuals in our country, and they go up. That's what Labour deliver. They deliver broken promises to the people of Scotland, and Mr Sarwar will be no different.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister when the Cabinet will next meet.
First Minister.
Next meet on Tuesday.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, Winifred was an active 87-year-old until she fell and broke her hip. Her family say that they are aghast at what happened next. In the weeks that followed, she experienced a 12-hour wait in accident and emergency, an unsafe discharge, a 9-hour wait for an ambulance to take her back to hospital, and yet another 12-hour wait in A&E. And Winifred is not alone. These waits for emergency care have skyrocketed since the SNP came to power. New research we are publishing today shows that more than 12,000 people aged over 85 waited longer than 12 hours in Scotland's A&E departments last year. So can I ask the First Minister, what does he have to say to Winifred, to her family and the thousands of others like them so abjectly failed by his government?
First Minister.
The first thing I want to say is that I'm sorry to Winifred and to her family for the experience that they have had. As I have recounted on a number of occasions to Parliament, the Health Service faces extraordinary pressures as a consequence of the demand for assistance that there is in our healthcare system. I don't know the moment at which this incident happened, but if Mr Cole-Hamilton will furnish me with the details, I will respond to that in full. But as he knows, as I've recounted to Parliament, over the winter period, we've had extraordinary pressure on our healthcare system as a consequence of flu. What I can reassure Mr Cole-Hamilton about is that on the latest data available, 12-hour waits in accident emergency, which are completely unacceptable, are falling. 8-hour waits are falling, still completely unacceptable, but they are falling. As we begin to get on top of the implications of that wave of demand that the healthcare system has faced. In relation to delayed discharge, the Government is working very closely with health and social care partnerships to reduce the level of delayed discharge so that individuals are properly supported in their homes. And as a consequence of the agreement we managed to secure with the Liberal Democrats around the budget, local authorities will be able to benefit from more resources at their disposal to invest in social care to support individuals like Winifred, and the Health Service will obviously have more resources as a consequence of the budget agreement that we reached.
Thank you. Question number 4, Michael Matheson.
To ask the First Minister what assessment the Scottish Government has made of the recent study by the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit regarding the contribution of the net zero sector to the UK and Scotland's economy.
First Minister.
I very much welcome this report, which clearly sets out the importance of net zero sectors to our economy in Scotland. Our green economy is thriving and has grown by over 20% in the last 2 years, generating over £9 billion in GVA and supporting over 100,000 full-time equivalent jobs. This is faster growth than across the United Kingdom. This undoubtedly shows that the transition to net zero is driving progress towards our climate ambitions at the same time as delivering economic benefits.
Michael Matheson.
I'm grateful to the First Minister for his response, and he rightly highlights that this report demonstrates the progress towards net zero is having a positive benefit, with an increasing number of companies operating in the sector, increasing steadily year on year, creating more jobs and supporting our local economies and local communities. The progress highlighted in the report, however, does fly in the face of those who would seek to undermine the importance of achieving net zero, not just for our environment, but also for our economy, with some even going so far as to deny there is a need to achieve net zero. Therefore, does the First Minister agree with me that achieving net zero is critical to a future sustainable Scotland? And can he outline how he will ensure that the Scottish Government will ensure that my constituents, especially those working in areas such as the Grangemouth industrial cluster, will benefit from the growth of this sector in the months and years ahead?
First Minister.
First of all, let me make clear that I believe there is an absolute necessity and imperative for us to take climate action. It was the subject of a speech I made last week, in which I wanted to address the understandable unease that Mr Matheson puts to me about voices who are saying we no longer need to take the climate action. All of the evidence demonstrates we have got to do that, and to do it urgently. I think this report helps us to win the argument that there is economic opportunity from the transition to net zero, which again is very welcome. And in relation to Mr Matheson's local point, in relation to his own constituents who are affected by Grangemouth, I set out in a statement to Parliament last week the investment of £25 million of additional resources that the Scottish Government is making available, and I welcome the announcement the Prime Minister made on Sunday of the opening up of £200 million from the National Wealth Fund. And we will work, and I give Mr Matheson this assurance, we will work closely with the workforce in Grangemouth to advance on all of these issues.
Thank you. Douglas Lumsden.
Presiding Officer, with the growth in renewable energy, we're also seeing a huge rise in the number of battery storage sites right across Scotland, with over 300 in the planning system. And last week we had a fire at one of these sites at Rothieu-Norman, and constituents are concerned at the fire and pollution risks at these sites. And at committee this week, SEPA admitted that they are, and I quote, concerned about the risk associated with battery energy storage systems, and admitted there's currently no regulatory framework or even a timescale on when a legislative change might happen. First Minister, these can be dangerous systems. So will the Government take action to regulate the battery storage industry before a major incident occurs?
First Minister.
I recognise the importance of the points that Mr Lumsden puts to me. I would imagine, although I'll have to go and scrutinise this, that the regulatory oversight on these questions is likely to be a reserved issue, because I would imagine the proximity of the Health and Safety Executive will be critical in all of this. But I will explore the point that Mr Lumsden puts to me and write to him to set out the definitive answer. But I do think, regardless of where the responsibility lies, we must have a safe approach to the delivery of any battery storage plants. These are critical to the transition to net zero, but members of the public are entitled to reassurance about safety, and I'll give Mr Lumsden the definitive response that he looks for in writing.
Sarah Boyack.
The ECIU report actually highlighted statistics showing Scotland's growth in net zero employment contributions has slowed down and is now growing more slowly than every other region of the UK. So can the First Minister tell us why net zero employment growth in Scotland is so much slower when our natural resources are potentially greater, and what his plans are to deliver the jobs and training urgently needed to decarbonise our transport, our homes and buildings and our land?
First Minister.
Well, I indicated in my answer that Scotland's net zero economy supports 100,700 full-time equivalent jobs. This has grown by 19.5% since 2022, and the UK growth has been 15.2%. So Scotland's, on the data I've got in front of me, Scotland's job growth in net zero has grown faster than the rest of the United Kingdom. So I'm all for encouraging employment growth in net zero. We're taking decisions. I was up in Nig a few weeks ago at Sumitomo. I've got other visits in the north of Scotland next week where I'll be looking at other renewable energy developments. I'm all for it. And the government is, of course, the government put in place in the budget on Tuesday £150 million of additional resources on renewables development. Unfortunately, it was just one of the many issues that Sarah Boyack wasn't able to bring herself to vote for on Tuesday.
Question number 5, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to support farmers responding to threats to livestock from disease.
First Minister.
Officer, there are an unusually high number of threats being faced by farmers at the moment, including avian influenza, blue tongue, foot and mouth disease and Schmallenberg. Supporting farmers and producers is a key concern, and we are working with industry to guard against these threats. The Scottish Government has robust and regularly exercised contingency plans and a proven track record in responding effectively to notifiable diseases. We are asking farmers to remain vigilant and to discuss any concerns with their vet, and to report suspicion of notifiable disease immediately to the Animal and Plant Health Agency. The Scottish Government continues to work closely with other nations in the United Kingdom to monitor and assess the risks and prevent incursions of disease.
Brian Whittle.
Can I thank the First Minister for that answer? I think farmers do not have the problems to seek and are continuing to feel the financial squeeze from both the UK Labour Government's unfair family farm tax and the SNP Scottish Government's failure to deliver the rural support plan on time. As lambing and calving season are now upon us, they fear they may be facing further risks to the viability of their businesses in the form of biosecurity threats. Recently, a farmer in Ayrshire reported losing 92 of the 152 lambs due to Schmallenberg virus infection, a virus spread by the same disease vector as blue tongue virus. In the face of this, can I ask the First Minister what considerations his government has given to supporting the provision of Schmallenberg vaccine as the numbers of affected farms rise? How are these reports impacting disease surveillance of blue tongue virus, and what additional support is available to help farmers deal with the financial impact?
First Minister.
So obviously, I share Mr Whittle's concern about the sustainability of farming as a consequence of the inheritance tax changes. I've made that comment publicly before. And the Government, of course, has put in place a financial settlement of over £600 million for the agricultural farming sector, which has been allocated in the budget process, which, again, I would gently remind Mr Whittle he was unable to support on Tuesday. So we're putting financial support in place for the farming industry. This Government fulfils its commitments to farmers. Now, I've seen the news reports that Mr Whittle refers to, and I'm obviously very concerned about the implications for the individual farmer. Schmallenberg is non-notifiable in the UK or the EU, meaning there is no requirement for farmers to report suspicion of the disease, because there is no control measures that government could take to prevent or eradicate the disease. I do, however, come back to the point I made earlier on, that we ask farmers, and I know I represent a large rural constituency, and I know the farming community takes this issue incredibly seriously, of reporting any concerns that they have to the relevant agencies. As a consequence of that vigilance, we have managed to stop outbreaks circulating of dangerous and damaging conditions, and we will continue to do so in the period ahead.
Thank you. Brief supplementary. Christine Graham.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I have, as Presiding Officer, we're aware many hill farmers in Midlothian, South Tweedale and Lauderdale, and they are, like everyone else, concerned at the spread of these viruses. And I hear what the First Minister had to say about measures in place to reduce the spread, because the Chief Veterinary Officer for Scotland has said it's inevitable that it will come. But and I heard what was said about Schmallenberg and how it's not notifiable. So what measures are in place across Europe, importing from Europe, not just in the UK, to try to reduce the spread of, let's say, Bluetooth?
Well, on the question of blue tongue, we already undertake routine blue tongue testing before and after movements of susceptible imported animals to ensure they do not introduce disease into this country. So that, I hope, provides Christine Graham with some reassurance that there is cross-border cooperation in this respect. In terms of vaccine provision, we currently do not allow vaccination for blue tongue serotype 3 in Scotland, which is a position supported by key Scottish industry organisations. But as I come back to the point I put on the record to Mr Whittle, that we do encourage farmers to advise their vets of any issues, and the Chief Veterinary Officer engages on these questions. The Rural Affairs Secretary updated Cabinet about these questions on Tuesday and will continue to do so.
Question number 6, Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister how the Scottish Government will protect the lives of racing greyhounds.
First Minister.
So the Government is committed to ensuring the welfare of all animals. The Government introduced the powers in the Animals and Wildlife Scotland Act 2020 to increase maximum sentences and fines for serious animal welfare offences. We also introduced provisions of the Animal Health and Welfare Scotland Act 2006, which offers significant and important safeguards for the welfare of all animals, including greyhounds. I am aware of Mr Ruskell's proposed Members' Bill to prohibit greyhound racing in Scotland. I can assure him this Government will give full and careful consideration to the details of his bill when it is tabled.
Mark Ruskell.
So, can I thank the First Minister for that response and the summary of existing legislation, but I would ask him to reflect personally on the fact that hundreds of greyhounds are killed across the UK every year, thousands are injured, and that these deaths and injuries are happening at licensed tracks. So it's quite clear that licensing won't protect the dogs and that we shouldn't be licensing animal cruelty as a nation. So will the First Minister work closer with me and now the Welsh Government in rejecting licensing of greyhounds racing and phasing out greyhound racing to protect the dogs?
First Minister.
Sir, I'm aware of the developments in Wales, and I'm very happy for officials and ministers to engage in dialogue with Mr Ruskell on these questions. We will engage with we're very happy to engage with our Welsh counterparts to explore the decision-making that they have taken, and I understand the importance of the point that Mr Ruskell puts to me, and will happily engage with him on that question.
Thank you. We move to general and constituency supplementaries. If we're all concise, more members will have an opportunity. And I call Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Sir Keir Starmer in the Labour manifesto committed to restore development spending to 0.7% gross national income. And just 3 weeks ago, Foreign Secretary cautioned that Trump's foreign aid cuts could be a big strategic mistake. This week, Labour has U-turned and announced major cuts to UK foreign aid. Does the Foreign Minister share my concern about the UK Government stepping away from global leadership on aid, and does he agree that if the UK Labour Government is looking to save cash, it could scrap the planned move of FCDO from East Kilbride in my constituency to Glasgow?
Sorry, Ms Stevenson, I believe you may have mentioned your constituency at the end of that question, but I will allow the First Minister to address that point specifically, but I would remind all members that we are here to discuss matters for which the Scottish Government has responsibility. First Minister.
So, obviously, I recognise the importance of employment in the East Kilbride constituency of my colleague Colette Stevenson that comes from the FCDO. There are outstanding plans to change the location of those employees, and I understand the concern that this is to the local member. And if there are any representations she wishes the Government to make, we will happily do so on her behalf.
Thank you. Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Sunday Post revealed a legal loophole is denying answers to Scots families when their loved ones die abroad. Confusion over ordinary residence means that since 2016, repatriated bodies no longer get a fatal accident inquiry. Families like those of Aberdeen's David Cornock, who died in Thailand in 2019, are denied closure while his children were made homeless because the insurance wouldn't pay out. Now, this government's been aware of this for years, but hasn't fixed it. So will the government urgently review and resolve this situation before any more families have to suffer?
First Minister.
I will look at this particular issue. I know that my colleagues, various colleagues, have raised this issue before, and I understand the concern that this issue will raise to families of those who are affected, and I will explore the issues and determine if there is further action that the Government can take.
Thank you. Martin Whitfield.
Presiding Officer, last week there was no secure accommodation available in the network in Scotland. Today there is just one bed. On the 20th of February, the Children and Young People's Commissioner for Scotland wrote to the Minister to say, "I've been told that instead of placement in safe therapeutic environments with integrated education and mental health support, that is our secure accommodation network, children have instead had to be placed in what has been described to me, the Commissioner, as, quote, cobbled together provision. Is it right, under your government, that the most vulnerable children in Scotland are relying on cobbled together provision?"
Always through the chair, please. First Minister.
No, I don't think it is. And the government, obviously there's been legislative change which is absolutely the right thing to do to stop the incarceration of young people in Polmont, so they cannot be accommodated in prison. That puts more strain onto the secure system, and the Cabinet is actively discussing what measures the government needs to take to boost the scale and the capacity of the secure estate to ensure that the type of flexibility that was available, or capacity that was available when young people were incarcerated in Polmont, can also be available in the secure estate, because we must be able to provide appropriate accommodation for young people for those judgments, and that work is actively underway at the present moment.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, CalMac announced the reshuffle of its vessels and timetables due to exceptional issues, which caused a third of its large vessel fleet to be out of action or operate with a reduced capacity. The MV Clansman overhaul has been delayed, the MV Isle of Lewis will take an extra month, and the MV Isle of Mull is restricted to just 45 passengers. For most of last year, the MV Caledonian Isles was out of action, with its return now pushed back to the end of April, meaning no services out of Ardrossan for another 2 months. What reassurances can the First Minister give to island communities who now fear a summer of chaos?
First Minister.
So the CalMac faces an incredibly congested set of circumstances as a consequence of issues in the ferry fleet. Mr Gibson has narrated them. CalMac have undertaken planning work to ensure that routes can be serviced and essential services can be delivered. That will be kept under constant review to ensure that there is adequate support for lifeline services. There are, of course, new vessels that are scheduled to be delivered. We have the Glen Sannox now in operation. We have 4 other vessels that are due to join the fleet that are being constructed at the Chemry Yard, and the Glen Rosa is also to join the fleet. So the assurance I can give to Mr Gibson is that the expansion of capacity and the modernisation of capacity is underway. Mr Gibson also will be aware that in relation to Ardrossan, the Transport Secretary is has made a significant intervention to ensure the sustainability of routes out of Ardrossan in the years to come.
Thank you. Tim Eagle.
Thank you, First Minister. This is from a letter I received yesterday. When I was 11, I was a happy child. I had friends, I had a happy home, and I never found school a struggle. Shortly after my 12th birthday, I was sent to board away from home. I live on the Isle of Mull. This is an emotional letter from a local resident presiding officer regarding the future of the Isle of Mull Secondary School. Residents on the island are contacting me with deep concerns about the selection process for the site for the new school, where all islanders just want the council to listen and what's best for every child. There is far too much detail for me to get into now, but can I ask the First Minister if he, like me, believes it really is vital to ensure the community are at the centre of the decision-making process? And will the First Minister meet with islanders and myself and any other MSP who wishes to join, virtually or on the island, to listen to their story and help ensure the right decision is made?
First Minister.
Well, I understand the significance of the issue, but this is exclusively a matter for the local authority. And I don't know why I'm being shouted at saying it's not. Education, perhaps I've got to just explain it, but education provision in Scotland is delivered by local authorities, and Argyll and Bute Council is the authority that is consulting on this section. Now, Mr Eagle and his colleagues are regularly accusing the government of centralising power in this country, and I'm simply pointing out that the issue he's complaining about is a matter for Argyll and Bute Council to consult upon. Now, on the question of consultation, I think, of course, there should be adequate community consultation. I'm not quite sure why I'm being shouted at by Rachel Hamilton, but I'm simply saying that if Argyll and Bute Council, I would advise and encourage to engage in consultation with the community to come to an agreed position. These are difficult issues, of course they are, and councils should engage properly with their communities.
Thank you. Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My constituent, Liam Robertson, has Parkinson's that is slowly taking away his independence and his quality of life, and the disease is no longer responding to his prescribed medication. However, his consultant has advised that a treatment called Produodopa could be successful in slowing his deterioration. And when I wrote to the Health Secretary, I was told it's up to individual health boards whether they prescribe this life-altering treatment or not. And NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde have told me that they will have to wait until care home applications are restored in order for the drug to be prescribed to him. It is critical that we break this impasse and get Mr Robertson the vital treatment he needs. So will the First Minister ask the Health Secretary to meet with me and Liam Robertson so we can ensure that he has access to Produodopa as soon as possible?
First Minister.
I'm very happy for the Health Secretary to meet with Mr Sweeney and his constituents on this question. I'm not quite clear of the status of the drug. That obviously have a determination on what can be made available, but I'm very happy to encourage that discussion to take place in order to address the points that Mr Sweeney puts to me.
Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. On Tuesday, Ofgem announced that the energy price cap will rise by 6.4% in April, meaning that energy bills will rise for the third time under the Labour UK government. So despite their election to cut energy bills by £300, they have instead increased by £300. Citizens Advice Scotland have stated it has supported 9,000 folk with their energy needs, and the average energy debt is currently £2,500. Does the First Minister agree that this blatant hoodwinking of voters from Anna Sarwar's Westminster bosses is nothing short of disgraceful during this cost of living crisis, especially in Aberdeen, the energy capital of the world?
Sorry, First Minister, I think further to what I said earlier, we will go on to the next question, and I call Rachel Hamilton.
Presiding Officer, I'm absolutely delighted that after months of pressure from MSPs and the borders, including my friend and colleague Bluetooth Christine Graham, we have finally seen the money, up to £5 million released from the Labour government to see a transformational extension of the Borders Rail and the feasibility study. Does the First Minister recognise how transformational this will be for my constituents and for the Borders economy?
First Minister.
Well, I'm a great supporter of the Borders Railway. I always have been, but I don't remember that always being the position of the Conservatives, or certainly maybe not all the Conservatives. I seem to remember, and I'll again come to defer to my dear friend Christine Graham, I do remember that chap John Lamont not being that supportive of the Borders Railway. But on a serious note, I think the Borders Railway has been an absolutely unparalleled success. It's improved connectivity. It's a great addition to the borders. I totally understand the aspiration to expand and extend the Borders Railway to cover other communities in the borders, and I'm glad that that funding has been released to enable that to be explored.
Willie Rennie.
First Minister will have seen that Sanjeev Gupta-owned South Australian steel plant at Waihala has been placed into administration. This follows another subsidiary, Liberty Steel East Europe, being placed into administration late last year. Gupta's DL plant here has not been producing for months. The company hasn't published accounts for years, and there's an outstanding Scottish Government loan. Yet there's been silence from the Scottish Government. What is the First Minister doing to ensure a future for the workers at DL?
First Minister.
Well, obviously, the Government acted in 2016 to ensure that there was not a closure at DL, and we encourage and endorse the points that Mr Rennie puts to me about the importance of securing productive activity at DL. We are aware of the GFG financial issues. There are obviously scrutiny being undertaken by ministers about these issues, because Mr Rennie correctly points out that there are loan issues involved, and the Government is assiduously engaging on this question to make sure that the interests of the workforce and the financial interests of the Scottish Government are protected at all times.
Emma Roddick.
The Children and Young People's Commissioner has said that the Scottish Government's proposed changes on religious observance do not represent significant progress towards UNCRC compliance, as they do not include allowing young people to independently opt out of religious observance at school. Parents have always had the right to opt their children out, but pupils have no equivalent right, no matter their age, maturity or personal beliefs. In an increasingly secular and religiously diverse country, it is critical that young people of all faiths and none have their beliefs and choices respected at school. Is this something that the First Minister will consider?
First Minister.
So this is an issue that is the subject of active the consultation period closed on the 26th of January. There are a wide range of views on the topic, and ministers will obviously consider and decide on the way forward. We will consider all responses to the consultation and publish an analysis in due course. And at that point, we will set out the steps that we will take forward to address the issues that are the subject of the consultation.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Murdo Fraser, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the gallery to do so.